are live. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Welcome to Rising Up with Jeryl. I am your host, Jeryl. It is so good to have you all here with me tonight. I have the most special guest this evening. Oh my gosh, I've been over the moon excited about this all day. It's like, oh, I can't wait for tonight to come. I have with me tonight Dr. Ruth Anderson, the founder and creator of Enlightened World Network. I'm going to read you her bio because it's amazing and I don't want to miss a thing. Absolutely. Dr. Ruth Anderson is an award-winning international best-selling author and founder of Enlightened World. She retired after a satisfying and worthwhile career in special education and public school administration. Then Ruth embraced her second calling, that of an intuitive reader and spiritual counselor. After becoming a reverend of the Church of Inner Light, she was given a ministry to witness and participate in the healing of souls with and without bodies in the ethereal realm called the Open Clinic. Ruth serves as a conduit for the spiritual divinity and shares her teachings in their teachings in an authentic and open manner. Her overreaching mission is to bring heaven to earth and to help others know their spiritual divinity. Ruth is passionate about sharing her experiences with the spiritual divinity and divine healing beings. Believing that light workers are often isolated and distracted from sharing their gifts, Ruth was inspired to create Enlightened World Network, Enlightened World Online, Enlightened World Network, and EWN Enlightened Living to support light workers in building their professional visibility so they can get back to sharing their light working talents with the world at a time when it is so desperately needed. Oh, amen to that. Welcome, Ruth. Oh my gosh. I am so happy to have you here tonight.
I am so pleased to be here, Jeryl, no question.
Awesome. I was just telling her before, I said, I was really glad that I hadn't researched her and done her bio and really found out who she was before she came to stay here with me and Terry and Deb. The three of them came to stay with me here at the river because I would have just been sitting around in awe of her. Every now and then in this world, you run across a person who quietly sits kind of in the background. Maybe they're right there in the front, but they're quiet, they observe, you can see they're taking everything in, but they're not out there broadcasting what they do. They're just so sure in themselves and just so, I don't know what the word is, but just so together and wise. You just kind of like, you watch them and you go, wow. And I was telling, it's like when I started doing this research, it was like this big Christmas box. And I opened up the one box and then there was another box inside of another box, inside of another box, and inside of another box. And that's who you are to me, Ruth. You're like Christmas because you bring so much to the table and you're doing so much for the spiritual community, for humanity with Enlightened World Network. It's changing lives. It's helping people transform. It is getting the word out there. But I would assume that you weren't always Dr. Ruth Anderson, spiritual leader and all of that. Where did this all begin with you?
Jeryl, as a child, I was always connected to spirit, but I didn't really have the words to understand that. But I felt it so strongly in nature, and I felt it so strongly in love relationships.
Wow.
I really I could not explain it. I couldn't understand it. And I also felt it in music. Just one song could bring me to tears, and it was so intense. And it really made no sense. So there always was this connection to spirit. And it wasn't until I was, golly, how old am I now? How old was I? It was like 6 years ago. So about 53, I guess is where that would be. I'm turning 60. That I had a life-changing experience with when a friend passed. And it completely turned my world upside down as far as embracing spirituality and seeing a totally different life path.
So were you raised in a more traditional type of home? I'm just kind of curious how that worked for you.
Definitely was. Yes. We attended the Methodist Church. It was a second home to me.
Okay.
But, Methodist churches, at least ours, was incredibly benign. There was not what I would call a real sense of spirituality to it.
Okay.
Or did it feel like there was a really strong relationship with the spiritual divinity?
Okay. So now, were you raised in this, you're like from a small child all the way up through your adulthood? So even when you started on your spiritual path, were you coming out of an active Methodist environment, or?
Sometimes I attended by guilt, and I wanted my daughters to be raised in it. And that was by guilt, more so than because of a passionate attachment that I had to it. So after a while, we stopped. We stopped going. So the girls went until they were in about 3rd and 5th grade.
Wow. Okay.
And then after that, I kicked in really strong with the actual relationship with it. So they've been watching this metamorphosis.
Right. So what is that? What was that experience that you had? I know, and I would like to reference just for a moment. You've written several books, and I can't wait to get them. I've got the anthology, and that's 3 books later, right?
Right.
But the first book that you wrote was One Love, Divine Healing at Open Clinic. And you talk about, and I love how this reads. It says, imagine standing in divine healing light and knowing, truly knowing, that there is life after life. When her best friend Sylvia was dying of cancer, Ruth had an awakening of latent clairvoyant abilities. She immersed herself in different methods of energetic healing, which will forever change her understanding of life and death. During meditation, she was shown the threshold between lifetimes and works with her spirit guides to heal spirits and assist souls. That, to me, when that was your turning point, would you go into more detail about that? This really is, I have God bumps from head to toe when I read that. I want to cry.
I was getting teary myself, and I wrote it. Yeah. So what happened was I had several, what I would call intuitive hits throughout the years. But again, I didn't have any words for it. Mm-hmm. My dearest friend, my best friend for 26 years, lived in California. I lived here in Colorado. And she would come out for Thanksgiving and we would cook together. And six years ago, she called and said she couldn't come out because her brother was terminally ill. So I understood that. But Thanksgiving morning, I woke up with the worst dream ever. It was one of those dreams that is so visceral that you can't just say, oh, that was just a dream. In the dream, her sister-in-law called me and told me that Sylvia was ill, dying in the hospital. And I couldn't shake it all of Thanksgiving, and I tried to call and couldn't get her. The next morning, her sister-in-law called me and told me that Sylvia had had a stroke at Thanksgiving dinner and was in the hospital, and that she was paralyzed half of her body. So I flew out to California, and over the next 4.5 months, I was, between states, back and forth, trying to help her and love her the best that I could. She passed of stomach cancer that we didn't know she had until about 2 weeks before she died. And that experience of getting messages from her when she was in California that was so clearly meant for me, I had to pay attention to that. I was with her the night she passed, and the next morning I was driving, trying to get across LA to get to the airport. And I'm not a fan of the LA freeways anymore. I used to live there, but now I don't enjoy it.
Right.
And so I was driving white knuckled anyway, and I was sobbing, absolutely sobbing. And all of a sudden I heard this rustling in the back seat. And I thought, okay, I think I'm going to die because there's somebody in the back seat and I'm here on the freeways. What do I do? And I finally got the courage to look in the rearview mirror, and I could see Sylvia in spirit in the back seat with her husband who had passed 3 years before. And she looked exhausted and he looked so happy. And my tears turned to laughter and tears. And I realized I wasn't losing her. And there is life after life. And it was so profound for me at that moment. And everything I'd experienced intuitively was making sense to me. And then I started taking classes and learning everything I could. And it was in those classes that I learned how to meditate, and I learned how to listen to spirit. And then Archangel Michael and Archangel Raphael started working with me. And they're the ones that introduced me to Open Clinic, and then told me to write a book about it. So that's what the first book is.
Yeah. What is Open Clinic? I'm so fascinated by that. What is it exactly?
I was absolutely dumbfounded by it as well. I went into meditation, and keep in mind, I would meditate every single day. It was just part of my daily routine to get up before anybody else is up in the home and meditate. And one particular day, I remember I was in the living room and I've got my eyes closed and I'm meditating, and all of a sudden I can see thousands of souls in my living room. And I open my eyes and I'm looking around and I'm not seeing them in the physical, but I close my eyes and they are there. And I said, okay, Archangel Michael, what is this? And he and Archangel Raphael came and put a minister's robe on me. And I said, okay, now what? And then they told me that these souls were there for healing. And I became a conduit for God's love and light to come down through me and to these masses. And I saw it in so many different ways. Sometimes it was one-on-one, sometimes it was hundreds of thousands at a time. And I learned how to tell who was still in a body, because they appeared as a white, hazy being.
Oh, so it was people not only that had passed, but people that were still on earth, but their souls had left their body to come find you.
Right.
Wow. Okay. That's a whole nother twist.
Right. And the ones that had already passed and had transitioned out of body were gray, sort of murky. So, and when they received the healing, and it wasn't just me being the conduit, Divine Mother and the archangels and other angels would assist in different forms of healing. If they had already transitioned over, sometimes they were escorted out by an angel. Sometimes they just went. But the ones that were still in body, that were white, flew back like a dove. It was fascinating to me to watch. Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. All right. I'm just like, I have a million questions in my mind right now.
Right.
So the ones who still had a body here on Earth, and you saw them fly back, were these weren't people that you knew, or were these people that you knew here in the third dimensional realm that were coming to you, that knew you? Or was it just spirit somehow said, okay, there's some light, and go to that person and she will help you?
A little bit of both. Some of them, like the first couple ones I saw, it was like, why are they here? Did they die? And it was like, nope. And they were, as spirit, they were just like, nope, I understand you're doing healing. I want to see what this is. So,
Wow.
so that was some of the ones that were alive. Some that were fascinating to me were ones that I had read about in the newspaper or seen on the news.
Oh.
And a couple days later, they'd show up and receive healing. And then I would follow them in the news to see how they were doing. And they all did great. I mean, it was so cool. And some of them that had passed, I knew who they were. And but most of them, I didn't know who they were. Yeah, it's been a fascinating ride.
Wow. See that that's just, I could sit and listen to them. We could talk about this for the next 2 days and I would not want to stop. So let me ask you this. Was it difficult at first? So I'm sure that maybe there were some that you saw in the news or you or in the newspaper or whatever. Did any of those pass? And in the beginning when you were doing this, did you have any one of the things we're working on right now, a lot of us are attachments to outcome. And I know with Reiki and that you're not in charge of outcomes in that. So did you have to deal with that at all when you were doing this work, or was there a piece about it that you had the whole time, knowing that the highest good was served no matter what?
You know, it's for me oddly peaceful, even when it's someone that I love dearly. Because I know that they are there to receive healing on a soul level, regardless of what their path is, whether they're supposed to pass now or be ill for a while, get better or whatever. It's their soul's journey.
Right.
So the best I can do is love them while they're going through their soul's journey. So no, I really wasn't attached to the outcome. Right. Oddly, it really was kind of odd. It was like, why isn't this bothering me? It's like, no, because it's the soul's journey.
Right. And I would assume that working with the Divine Mother and the archangels in that, there is a download of knowingness, maybe, is that the best way to say it, that you received? Because I'm sure it didn't just go like, poop, okay, I'm this healer, boom, boom, boom. I would assume that there had to have been something else that was going on in addition while this was happening to you.
Oh, this was, keep in mind, days and days and days of intense meditation to train me and clear me and teach me. And yes, it was intense training. And I'm in training every day.
So a lot of people, and I know there's a lot of people actually watching here that have lost us, especially we're really going through a lot of loss here with the COVID, and also just in general, So what would you say to them? Because you do have a piece about it, because as this your promo said, you were shown the threshold between life and death.
Right.
So a lot of people are truly looking for peace and comfort right now. How would you speak to that?
In my second book, which is Walking with Spirit, I was taken to the ethereal realm to see 7 different levels of the afterlife. Everything ranging from what they call heaven all the way down to what they call hell. I stood in every single one of them. Some of them were familiar to me. Some I never want to go back to. Yeah. And the process of passing, where you walk down the dark tunnel, it was fascinating, Jeryl, and I have to tell you, because it was Archangel Azrael, who is the Archangel of Death, that taught me this. And this was over several days. And he had me walk down. I wasn't walking, I was moving in spirit down this very, very dark tunnel. And all of a sudden, it was as if the walls were moving, and it was framed photos all over, like thousands of framed photos. And it was me in all different aspects of my life. And I'm watching them. It was my life review.
Wow.
But for me, it was in photo form. And I'm watching them, watching them, watching them. And I moved over and was in God's divine light, which I have been in before, right? And I love it and I adore it. And I can imagine if you don't know that energy, it would fell you to your knees, right? But because I work in that energy so often, it was like, yes, I'm home, right?
Okay.
And I was moved forward to this panel, and they were all white. There were 7 of them. And the one in the middle was an archangel. It wasn't Azrael, it was a different archangel, none that I knew by name. And then there were 3 white beings on either side of the archangel. And they asked me questions telepathically, and I answered telepathically. And they knew the answers darn well about my life, everything about my life. And it really was, did I work in my soul's calling? How did I love people? It was about love. And when I answered that, it was fascinating because they said, not in words, but telepathically, okay, go to level 3. And everything in me said, no, I am not going to level 3. And then, I'm in my head going, what's level 3?
Yeah, right? I was just going to say, what's on level 3 that is like, no, I don't want to go there.
I don't even know what this means. But I was going, absolutely not. I'm not going to level 3. And so I came back in and talked more with them about what I had been doing in my life and my work at Open Clinic and, my work with clients at that point and trying to bring as much divine light as I could into the world. And they said, okay, go to level 2. And I went, okay, fine. Because I knew that was a good place for me to be. So my point being, that process of dying is love. It's pure love. And it's returning home to the love of the Creator. And I can tell you, when my father passed, and he knew of the work that I had done, he had read my books, I was with him on his deathbed. And 18 hours before, he had had a near-death experience. He was, nodding off in the chair, and all of a sudden he said, I died. I just died. He experienced the same tunnel, the darkness. He was surrounded by souls that he knew and loved. And everyone was like, hey, nice to see you. Welcome home. And he said, they told me I had to come back. He said, I don't want to be here. I want to go back. How do I get back? And the last 18 hours of his life was all about, how do I get back there?
How did you advise him at that point? What were you able to provide him with? And here's why I asked this question. When my grandmother, who was my best friend, I adored her. I grew up, she was my best friend. She loved me unconditionally. She was on her deathbed and she had the death rattles, and she was I had just stepped on my spiritual path. So I was seeing things way differently. I didn't have that attachment to her 3D body, and I knew it was her time. And so everyone left the room. It was amazing how everybody just left my mom. It was my mom's mom and her husband and everybody. And they left me there alone with her. And I went up and I sat with her on the bed. And I told her how much I loved her and how much she meant to me and how she had impacted my life. But it was okay. It was time. 2 of her sisters had just passed a couple months before. I knew they were there in the room with her. And I said, they're here to take you home. And we'll take care of Grandpa John. We'll take care of each other. It's time for you to move forward in your journey. It's okay. I love you so much. And with that, her breathing shifted. Everyone, like on cue, walked back into the room. And the nurse looked at me and looked at her and looked at me and looked at her and said, it will just be moments now. And I stepped away and sat down. And I bring that up because I know there are different ways to approach that. And I know that we can keep people here past the time that it's their time, to go or make it more difficult for those to let go. Now you're telling me a story of your father who was like, man, he's ready. How do I get to that next step? So how would you address, what did you do, and how would you address that with people? And it's a difficult call to make.
Well, what I did was, the week before he died, we had every conversation. I reminded him the things that I'd seen, reminded him things he'd read in my book, told him about Archangel Azrael, told him about it was a near-death experience that I didn't have to die for, which, thank you. I didn't have to go through that physically. I told him all that, and it opened the door for him to tell me about his spiritual journey. So I laugh now. At the time, it was like, oh my gosh. My sister was at one hand, I was at the other as he was trying to pass. Mm-hmm. And he would say things like, would you please just grab the pillow and put it over my face?
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then he said, if you can find something, if you can find a gun, would you please shoot me? I said, Dad, I am not going to jail for you. And we both laughed. I mean, he and I both laughed on his deathbed. We both kind of chuckled, but it was like, holy cow.
Right.
And as he was dying, literally, he's walking me through it. He's telling me with his mouth, okay, he's going, okay, I see this. And he said, I can't untie it from around my body. And he's trying to untie his soul from around his body. And he said, it's like, it's caught around my, like it was his first chakra, right? It was
okay. Yeah.
The base of the spine. He said, it's wrapped around the base of my spine and I can't unhook it. It's like, oh my gosh. And we didn't breathe, right? I mean, because he wanted to go so badly that we hardly breathed because we didn't want to disturb his attention. I've never seen anyone work so hard. He willed himself to die at that time. It was fascinating. Yeah. Absolutely fascinating. So, you just have to take every single situation as it comes. Because with Sylvia, I was with her while she passed, and we watched every single breath. You watch the flicker here as it's going out, and what she needed was just someone to just hold her while she went. My dad needed silent cheerleaders, right? And they all just need different things. So
that I have to tell you that it's just like it fascinates me how not exposed to these things we are. We are so shielded and encouraged not to talk about death in our society. And I'm hoping that one of the things that comes out of all that we're going through right now, because we are seeing how we are connected collectively, we are seeing how we're not separate, and we're getting a chance, an opportunity to go within. And there are people who are meditating and doing things they've never done in their lives because they've never been in this place. And obviously it wasn't working real well for us before, what we were doing as a collective consciousness. So I'm finding that people are more and more open to what you're saying too, groups like Enlightened World Network and the programming that you provide. So I'm loving this conversation because we are seeing death on a global level in a way we never have, except for maybe, I think somebody said the other day that there were less deaths in the Vietnam War than there have been so far with this virus. And so I think it's important that we look at death in a whole new way. Not that we don't grieve, not that we don't have our rituals surrounding death, and some of them obviously are postponed because of social distancing and isolation, but that we start to see death from a whole new perspective. And I think that's what you're bringing to this discussion, is what death really is, because I think the old way is not truth.
Well, and really the most beautiful gift I was given was those last moments, to be able to love them, both Sylvia and my father, so intensely that I could be there for that part of the journey. What a gift I got from both of those.
Right. Yes, I experienced the same thing with my grandmother. And you can't, that is something I will take with me for the rest of my days. And, you know, when she pops in on me, and she does, she's one of my guardian angels, that it's really quite lovely that I have that memory with her. It was, I was able to let her go and to honor her stages of life. That leads me to my next question. So oftentimes, since you are in connection with spirit and work with those who have passed, do you find that, since you are connected to spirit, I want to word this correctly, for those who have lost people, we tell them, you know, your loved one is there with you for a while, typically. What is your experience of souls that have passed over and their interaction with their loved ones that are still here on the earth plane? Can you address that a little bit for us? You know,
I would say there is no typical reaction. I think some of them get over there and they just keep going, right? Like, I'm moving on. And other ones stay. Sylvia stayed with me for probably 4 months. She helped me plan her celebration of life, down to which song, which flowers, which people to invite. She planned it, right? And I heard it so clearly. And what a gift. My dad came to me the morning after he passed.
Okay.
And so I have felt him several times. So, but not everybody does that.
Okay.
Not everyone does.
And I lost that question. So what are some of the ways that they come? Like you said, your father came to you. How did you experience that? Did you hear his voice? Did you just feel his energy? Did you smell him? How did that happen?
Yeah, several different ways. He was really good about showing up. One time I went over to my mom's and I sat down in front on the floor, in front of the chair that he always sat in.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt his hand on my shoulder. And it was as if he was behind me with his hand on my shoulder. I was like, yep, I know you're there. But the morning that he passed at midnight. I, stayed with mom and then came home the next morning. I had to get back into the world of the living. It's very heavy and intense. And I was walking through the parking lot at PetSmart, and it was snowing, hard to see, and I was right behind a car that put on its backup lights. And I thought, I'm going to get hit, right? I mean, I was stupidly that close to it. And I thought, well, that would just be horrible for my mom to lose my dad last night and me right now, right? I mean, that's what went through my head.
Right.
And And so I stepped forward really quick, and I heard my dad's voice as clear as day. And he said, "Ruth?" And I said, "Yes, Dad." I mean, it was just so him. I said, "Yes, Dad." And he said, "Thank you." I said, "You're welcome." And I said, "You're talking to me." And he goes, "How about that?" Which was so my dad. So my dad. Yeah.
That's amazing. So if people, they're meditating now, and when we talk about ascension, we talk about, third dimension, fourth dimension, fifth dimension, and that the veils between the dimensions are becoming much thinner. What can people do to get more in touch with that and be more present with spirit?
It's time. It's a relationship. The thing about the Methodist Church growing up, when I think it's a lot of mainstream religions, you go in, they talk at you. You might have maybe a 3-minute prayer where they're praying for everything, and then you get about a minute of quiet prayer yourself, and that's it until next week. And then next week you get a minute of what
Right.
relationship can be built on 1 minute a week? It isn't. So to me, it's about spending that time in what I call prayerful meditation, and asking in the archangels, ask in Divine Mother, ask in Christ, if you believe in the Christ consciousness. Sit at the feet of your creator, whatever that is for you, and you stay there long enough to listen. It's not just sitting with God and giving him your laundry list. Please do this. I want you to do this. I'm hoping you'll do this. That's not a relationship.
Right.
God is not Santa Claus. So it's that time, it's that commitment. And then during the day, when you're doing your thing, you still stay open to spirit. And if you feel a little something in your lungs, you stop and you check in with it. If you hear a little rustle, if a particular bird is calling you, you stop and you pay attention, because that's how spirit talks to us. And you learn, how is spirit representing itself so you can access it.
Okay. I know a lot of people lately have been on our show in the morning talking about songs. Like a song will come up that reminds you of someone that had passed, or and dreams. What have you had a lot of dream experience with all of this? What does that look like to you if you have it?
Yeah, I can always tell the difference between a dream and a spiritual vision, because those spiritual visions are so visceral that you don't forget them. You remember those stick with you, because those are messages from spirit. And so, yes, I have had several of those, and I write them down. I journal while I'm meditating. And that's where my books have come from, is from that journaling of what I've been taught. So I would recommend anybody to do that. If you have one of those dreams that is spirit trying to communicate with you, write it down. If you hear something special, experience something special, write it down. I really do believe, Jeryl, that we are all on our own curriculums, our own spiritual curriculums. And what I've experienced isn't what you've experienced. And that's not what Terry's experienced. And none of them are wrong. And I don't need to be you, and you don't need to be Terry. It's all individual, and it's all perfect just as it is. So when you ask about what can you do to, increase your awareness of whatever, just stay connected to spirit, and they are going to guide you on whatever path you're supposed to be on. And if that doesn't mean that you talk about, the seventh, eighth, ninth dimensions, that's not in your curriculum, and it's okay.
Yeah. I really like that advice, because I think there is a tendency in, the New Thought community, the metaphysical community, to we compare. I wish I could channel the way this person does, or I wish I had that gift, or I wish I had this gift. And I've been on this path for about 35 years now, and I am finally just really easing into, I'm exactly where I need to be. And it's okay if I don't have that gift or this gift. I have my gifts. And that has been a really clear message that I've personally been getting here over the last, I would say, 6 months or so, very strongly. You are exactly who you need to be. You are shining your light the way you need to shine your light. It is unique. It is not like anyone else's. And if we all really get comfortable with shining our own light, the world is just going to be this one big lighthouse.
Oh, absolutely. That's what we're here for, is bring in that divine light and amplify it out for others. But, you know, you remind me of a really important point. As I was going through those first 4 years, literally, I felt so alone because there really wasn't anybody who could mentor me. They could teach me some things like Reiki or, you know, energy work or meditation, that kind of thing, but not one person in a body could mentor me and tell me where I've been or where I was going. And I craved that so badly. And Archangel Michael and Raphael were so clear with me. You are going through your own experiences that no one else has gone through. So no one can tell you where you're going. So stop looking for that. It was huge for me. They were my mentors. They had to be my mentors. Now I've got community, you know, and it's taken a long time to find that community. And that's part of what Enlightened World brings, is community. So people can sit around and say, wow, I had this experience. Have you ever had that? It's a safe place for that community. But the mentors need to be from the spiritual realm.
Yes, because they see it all. So that brings me to a very nice segue. Thank you. So you've literally been through the dimensions. You have had some of the most numinous, awe-inspiring experiences I've ever heard of. How did Enlightened World Network happen? So you've been on this journey. You've had losses, you've had all these experiences, you've been meditating every day, you've just had like your whole world just kind of like rip apart, come back together. I mean, I'm assuming it was like, just like, I don't even know who I am anymore. And then finally came to a place of, okay, I think I know who I am. How did you get from there to what I'm seeing? Whoop. Here, Enlightened World Network, and what's over your head. How did that happen? I can't wait to hear.
About 3 years ago, Archangel Michael and Archangel Raphael started sharing with me things that were, if I was willing to participate, right? Because we all have veto power. We can say no at any time. But if I was willing to participate, what I could bring into the world. And they showed me, first they said things like, why don't you start journaling your meditations? And so I did. And then they said, okay, why don't you write a book? And I said, what? And they said, yeah, write a book, put that all out there. And I thought, well, gosh, that means I have to like come out. I have to, it's coming out of the closet here, folks. And they said, yeah. So I wrote the book. Then they said, get on some podcasts. How do archangels know what a podcast is, right?
Exactly.
So get on some podcasts. I said, well, how do I do that? And then they led me to podcasts. And then they said, well, have your own weekly show. I said, well, how do I do that? And they led me to International Angels Network. So I had been weekly shows for about a month. that's only like 4. And they said to me, you're going to have your own network. I said, no, I'm not. They said, yes, you are. So the whole rest of that year was learning how to do a podcast. How do I meet guests, and how do I interview them, and how do I do this, and how do I do that? And then when that year was up, it was like, okay, now create it. And it's going to be called Enlightened World and Enlightened World Network. Enlightened World is the website. It's the overarching umbrella. And Enlightened World Network is that avenue for providing podcasts. I said, okay. And they would bring me people that would give me little bits of information like, oh gosh, you really should be on YouTube. Okay, fine. So we launched the website and YouTube and Enlightened World Network all on, it was 11/1 of 18. So 18 months ago.
Wow.
And right now we have 600 videos up on Enlightened World Network. And we're now running 2 channels. We've got Enlightened World Network and we have EWN Enlightened Living. And I'm being shown other channels to bring in. And it's all Michael and Raphael, and they're continuing to tell me and give me suggestions. And I try to be a very good steward of what I'm hearing. Mm-hmm. And I have pretty much stopped saying, they're always over here. If you want to, they're always over here. And I've pretty much stopped saying, do you know how much time that's going to take? I mean, the things that they asked me to, oh, just put that together. It's like, wow, you have no idea how this earthly realm works with time, because they have no time.
They have no time. Exactly. No time. Sleep? What's that? I don't know.
I know. Yeah. I know. They've got me down to like 4 hours a night. And I'm fine with that. It's whatever. Excuse me. So yeah, Enlightened World Network is blossoming under my feet. And part of it is trying to provide a loving space for it to happen. And the other part is trying to be on top of it administratively to make sure that things aren't falling through the cracks and that it's being built up as we go. But it's great fun. And right now we're running at typically about 9 shows a day between the 2 different channels. It's such a beautiful way to support other light workers in their work. I love it.
It's amazing. Now, I want to get into maybe just to diverge just for a second. In the beginning, when you had of EWN and they were telling you, okay, you're going to do this, because I know a lot of people, myself included, we get these messages from our team, whoever that is, our angels and our guides and everyone else, and they say, well, you need to come out of hiding. You need to bring, in my case, it's like, you need to bring back Rising Up with Jeryl. And you kind of go, you get this kind of like catch in your chest, like in your heart and throat chakra. And you kind of go, okay, yeah, I'm hearing the words and that. And I have to say, you make it look so seamless and so easy and so smooth. And so I think there are people out there that might be saying, well, yeah, you can do it, but I could never do that. And people say to me, well, you can interview and you do this and you do that. Well, I have to tell you, when I first started a couple years ago doing Rising Up, I couldn't breathe. I literally couldn't breathe. I was having full-blown panic attacks before I would go on. And I did it for about 6 weeks and then said, I can't do this. I was too stressed out. That has changed. But how did you have those moments where you just thought, seriously, I cannot handle this burden. There is no way I can do that. This is just me. How did you get through that? Because I think there are other people who have that happened to them.
Right. Well, let me back up and say one of those first podcasts that they lined up for me to do, it was a woman who forgot that we were going to do it. So I was like coiffed and I'm, all ready and I'm hardly breathing and she's not calling and she's not calling. And so then I finally called her and she said, "Oh, was that today?" And I said, "Yeah, that was today." So she comes on in her living room in her pajamas and she says, "Well, as long as they can only see me from here up, it's good." And her hair's and and she had no idea what my book, she had no idea what I was going to be talking about. And my walk away with that was, if she can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
And it was perfect because I thought, she's got a podcast. I can do this. And so I would say to anybody out there, if I can do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
I started out completely white knuckled. I mean, I would, the dry mouth because I'm panicked. And there were some shows I don't even think I breathed during. I was talking so fast and trying to cover so much information, but they knew I needed someone next to me. And they brought a beautiful woman by the name of Linda Dirks into my world.
Yes, I know who Linda is. She's amazing.
Yes. I was told to go to this Hay House conference, which I had really in Phoenix. I had no intention of going. I sat in the second row. The woman right in front of me was Linda Dirks, who came from California. So there we were. We found each other. We connected. She was the only souvenir I brought home from the conference, mind you. And she joined me on something like the first 17 shows that I did on International Angels Network. And just having somebody next to me on the phone was what I needed. So, if you're panicked about doing this, don't do it alone.
Yes.
Do it with someone that can hold your hand and you guys can be nervous together. But this should be fun. If you're feeling that panicked about it, take a step back and think, well, is this the right time? Is my message the message I should be putting out there? Is it in alignment with me? Because if the message you're coming out with isn't in alignment with you, you are going to panic and it's not going to feel good to you.
Yeah. And I know for me, I was in broadcasting and television and radio, and I was behind the scenes. I was a writer, producer, director. And my host for this, we did this weekly, hourly television show, and it was an interview show, and my host was sick, and I had to step in and do it for him. Well, I was in my 20s. I was so bad. I swear to you, I don't even to this day remember one question I asked. It was the worst experience of my entire life. And when John Fiore told me, he said, "Kid, you're going to do a show. It's going to be called Rising Up with Jeryl, and you're going to bring on people and you're going to interview them and you're going to get their message out. You're going to get your message out. You're going to do this." I said, "John, no, I'm not, because you know what? I'm horrible at it. I cannot do that. I was the worst. And I thought I was going to literally die from a panic attack, right?" I said, I couldn't possibly do that. Well, 2 years later, I did my first show, and that was 2 years ago. And I just, honestly, I think, and I do want to point out what you just said. Sometimes it's not the right time. But here's the thing. I'm so glad I did it, even though the timing, it wasn't the right time for me to continue. It was the right time for me to have that experience and to have that under my belt, so that when it was the right time, it really wasn't so scary. And the first show, Terry came on with me, and that made all the difference in the world to have her here with me, because she was my first guest before. And I love the fact that you mentioned to bring someone in with you. Don't do it by yourself if you're scared. I know we have a lot of people even in the Angelic River family, and different groups that I kind of move in and out of, that have such a beautiful voice and they have such beautiful things to say. but they have such a fear of coming on, and how do I do the technology? For me, it's technology. That's been my thing. So I would love to see them encouraged to find their voice. Just go on for a short time even. What do you think about that? Just like a brief little life hack or something,
Oh, well, absolutely. And give yourself the grace of not knowing what you're doing. The first time I did a Facebook Live, I was with Ivana Vazo Morano, who's one of our hosts right now. It took us 7 hours, literally.
Oh my gosh.
7 hours over 3 days to get it right.
I'll be darned. Okay.
So really give yourself time. But I think one of the most important things, you can't be an expert at everything. You can really only be an expert at what you have experienced. And that's all I talk about, is what I have experienced. Because guess what? No one can tell me I'm wrong.
Right. I love that. I love that. And yeah, I just love that. I can't even add to that. That's so perfect. It's like, be your authentic self.
Right.
If you're your authentic self, you're going to be just fine. So we don't have but a few minutes left. I want to know, what is your vision moving forward for Enlightened World Network? You were saying that we have now EWN, Enlightened Living. What are some of the new shows that are coming up and some of the new things that you see happening for EWN?
I have been shown a really big vision, a really, really big vision of how large Enlightened World Network can be. Mm-hmm. Covering the globe, right? Hitting all of the different countries. And it's going to come in little bits at a time, which I appreciate because I'm the one trying to bring this in. One of the shows coming up is EW Littles, which is programs for little guys. So folks coming on and telling stories, so the mom can have them watch and listen to a bedtime story or whatever, maybe learning how to meditate or learning about mindfulness, but programs for little guys. So that's EW Littles. And then there's going to be a Stewards of Our Earth one that's going to be coming up. So that's, how do we love our Earth? How do we care for our planet and really be stewards of that which God has given us? So those are two of the ones coming up. Terry Angel is doing Angel Speakers that is also in Spanish. So we're going to be broaching different languages and different programs for different parts of the world. So yeah, it's just beginning. It really is.
So exciting. It's so exciting to be here at the threshold of this new world for EWN and to see it start from its infancy and to be able to watch it grow. I see it as the next Gaia TV, and how they have just so many different varied programs. Ruth, I can't believe we're out of time, but this has been, thank you so much. I'm just so excited that people got to get to know you better. You are such a great person for bringing the light out and the information out and people's authentic selves out of others. But we don't get that privilege with you a whole lot. So I thank you so much for coming on with me. How can people get a hold of you if they'd like to contact you or EWN?
So if you go on to enlightenedworld.online, that's the website, and it's got a contact piece down there. So you can just send an email and I'll get back in touch with you.
Wonderful, wonderful. I can't thank you enough. And I hope you'll all just, I know that you have a daily lineup, right, on both Enlightened World Network and in EWN Enlightened Living, correct? There's a lineup that people can see the daily shows. And I want to thank all of our viewers tonight. There have been so many, and I apologize we didn't get to your comments, but I couldn't not stop listening to Ruth because there was just so much that came out that was so informative and I think really powerful for each and every one of us to hear. Next week, please join me. My guest is going to be Karen Rogowski, and we're going to be talking about the power of forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful transformational tools that we have. And she also is an Akashic Records instructor. So please join me next week for Karen Rogowski. And once again, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ruth Anderson. I just love you. I love Enlightened World Network, and I'm so honored to be a part of this family. And do stay tuned later for Robert Painley and his ghost story pajama party. So please don't forget Robert coming up at 10 p.m. So good night, everybody. God bless you all. And thank you for being with us, and have a blessed week, and happy Mother's Day to everyone tomorrow. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.